This is America, and this is the U.S. Capitol, home to the U.S. Congress, one of three separate but equal branches of government under the Constitution. After 250 years of independence, we're going to explore how the Constitution became the framework for modern democracies and a living, evolving document. I'll be back in a moment, but first, Alex Marquardt is in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much, Patty. 250 years ago, the Second Continental Congress was meeting just north of here in Philadelphia. They were drafting, debating, and revising a document that would go on to change the course of history. I'm Alex Marquardt here in Washington. It was the Declaration of Independence, 13 colonies formally breaking away from Great Britain to create a new independent nation. And then, for nearly a decade, the newly formed United States of America was at war with Great Britain. The leaders of that revolution gathered to establish the framework for their new nation. Written in 1787, the U.S. Constitution has become the world's longest living charter of government, affirming that the government exists to serve its people. And that Constitution remains central to the country's identity today. Here's Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan with more on the ongoing effort to keep that document relevant.
Basically, this is the oldest remaining structure in Mecklenburg County,
where historians say in 1775, Hezekiah Alexander helped launch the cause of American independence.
The invasion of our rights as attempted by the Parliament of Great Britain. What he's doing at this desk, he's writing some of those founding documents. We're talking about the independence of Mecklenburg County and of North Carolina and eventually of the nation. And that intellectual activity right here.
Nolan Dom of the Charlotte Museum of History says years of British financial and political abuse, plus news of the battles at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, convinced North Carolinians and then other colonists to break away. The United States was born out of 13 British colonies in 1776, but it was the writing of the Constitution in 1787 that has shaped the country to this day. The framers of the 1787 Constitution opened the document with three significant words: we the people. The message? The United States would be governed by rules and policies endorsed by the people, not by a remote, unelected leader. That meant a Congress, a president, and a judiciary chosen with public input. But the framers knew the Constitution had problems. It was written by white men, some of whom were enslavers. Slavery was still legal, women had no legal standing, and the government could still violate people's property and privacy rights. And so the framers included a process for amending the document. Now, after more than 200 years, 27 amendments have been added, guaranteeing free speech, religious freedom, and gun rights. Slavery is outlawed, women can vote, and individual legal rights are protected. The framers wanted to protect the Constitution from political fads, and so they deliberately made the amendment process a tough one.
The concurrent resolution is adopted.
2/3 of both houses of Congress and 38 states must agree.
They knew they were human. They were at the time writing about how conflicted they were about the direction of the nation, about how people might misconstrue their words in the future for their own political purposes.
Ultimately, the framers and many others, including Hezekiah Alexander, achieved a goal that has lasted for more than 2 centuries.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
A government intended to serve the people, not the other way around. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Those first three words of the U.S. Constitution, we the people, declared a revolutionary idea that the power belongs to everyday Americans, not to the government, not to any one leader. Hattie Culhane has more.
So important that take a look at this portrait that hangs in the house side of the U.S. Capitol, the signing of the Constitution. It starts, we the people. At the time, revolutionary. It says the power doesn't come from a king, doesn't come from the government, it comes from the people. What's very interesting is what was supposed to come after we the people. It was written originally to say we the people of the state of New Hampshire, the people of Massachusetts, going on down from north to south for all the different states. But then it went to the Style Committee, and the 5 members of the Style Committee were Federalists. Basically, at the time, there was a debate between whether or not the federal government should have the majority of the power or the states should. So it was written as we the people of these states, and then when the Style Committee went, it went to Federalist, and they changed it to we the people of the United States, setting the tone for what would follow for the next 250 years.
I'm joined now by Ernesto Castañeda, who is the director of the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies at American University, and Bruce Fine, who is a constitutional lawyer. Ernesto, Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to discuss. Ernesto, I want to go to you first. We just heard Rosalind and Patty talking about this document that starts with we the people. To what extent do you think its original intention has been upheld? Essentially, what has been achieved versus what is still aspirational?
Yes, Alex, that's a great question. And like everything in the US, it's a big remix of the best ideas around the world. So the Constitution, when it was drafted, it was largely influenced by the Magna Carta in England, especially the rights of the people. And then in the US, inspired by Native American practices and people coming together, the Founding Fathers produced a new document. And that has lofty ideals, that there's a relatively weak government and the people together decide the common fate. So that's a new idea that is inspired by the Enlightenment in Europe, but it's the first time when it's a legal document of a country. And it ends up influencing countries around the world. So the ideas are really high. We haven't gotten there perfectly because we had slavery, women couldn't vote. Now we have the issue of undocumented citizens who are excluded from political rights. But that's the ideal, our approach to that political perfection of making one political unity out of many, a pluribus unum. And many American citizens born here or naturalized believe in that ideal and work hard to make it a reality.
Yeah, we certainly want to get into this, the questions surrounding immigration, because there's a lot going on in this country. Before that, Bruce, I do want to touch on something that Rosalind mentioned in her piece. She noted how the phrase "we the people" was rewritten, essentially putting more power in the hands of the federal government versus the states. Do you think that the balance of power that we see today between the federal government and the states was as it was originally intended?
No, the taxation amendment gave the federal government all the money and was able to influence the states by simply putting conditional grants and aids out there, so that the states will do what the federal government wants in exchange for getting subsidized. But I want to go back. The Constitution was written on the heels of the Articles of Confederation that did have an article said this is a compact among the states. The Constitution never was conceived in that way. In fact, it was conceived to get away from the Articles of Confederation. But I want to go back again, and I apologize for being a little bit down in the weeds. The idea of government by the consent of the governed, that's in the Declaration of Independence. That was not novel in the Constitution. And in the Declaration says all legitimate powers of government are by the consent of the governed. And the purpose of the government is to secure unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of unalienable means no one can take them away. 100% can't take them away. A king can't, a democracy can't. No, they are unalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it goes on to say, when a government becomes destructive of those ends, you have the right to overthrow it and install a new government. So I think that's critical. Now you ask, where are we today? Certainly in some respects, we're better off because we more honored the idea of everyone, all men are created equal, men and women, enfranchising both blacks and minorities and women, and getting away from Jim Crow law. But in other respects, we've gone backward. We now endow the president with authority to kill anybody he wants. He can say, you're a drug trafficker in the Caribbean, we're going to send the military, you're exterminated. He can say that I think you're going to be a future threat, and he can play prosecutor, judge, jury, executioner. He kills anybody he wants, whether it's a U.S. citizen or otherwise. And there's no accountability. There's no judiciary branch that checks that. He just does it however he wants. Despite and this program, we are being surveilled by the National Security Agency under these warrantless surveillance programs initiated by the executive. So when we think about the overall power of government to invade privacy, the liberty element as opposed to the equality element that you've referred to, which we make progress on the liberty element, no, we're back to July 4th, 1776. If King George, we didn't even accuse King George III of the right to kill anybody he wanted in America, said, you're creating quarrels in London, therefore we're going to kill you. That is the President of the United States. And I think it's the duty of the journalists to wake up.
Right.
We got to wake up to this very, very critical danger to all of us.
Certainly want to keep talking about what's happening in the present day. For the moment, we're going to go back in history to the late 1700s and talk about the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution that was inspired by the Declaration of Independence was a bold vision for this new society where, as they said, all men are created equal and all humans have this unalienable right to the life, the liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And even to many at the time, back in 1776, these were lofty goals, as they still are today. And this country still continues to live with a gap between what was proclaimed all those years ago, 250 years ago, and what is practiced today. Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith went to what's known as Independence Hall, where that declaration was adopted, to see how it has defined this country.
In the hot, humid early summer of 1776, a group of colonial landowners and lawyers gathered here to put the finishing touches to a declaration that justified why they were rebelling against the British Crown. That Declaration of Independence was a foundation stone of the United States of America, its principles copied by liberation movements across the world. Central to the Declaration was the belief that all men are created equal, and that any government that rejects that principle can be replaced. That was incendiary talk at a time when the world was still mostly run by hereditary monarchs. Here at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, a special exhibition highlights the Declaration's influence on liberation movements worldwide. French revolutionaries would draw inspiration for their own declaration. Simón Bolívar took these ideals across Latin America. When Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnamese independence in 1945, he quoted the American Declaration. And the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights is clearly influenced by it. There was, of course, a contradiction at the heart of the Declaration. Its authors were slave owners. All men were not, it seemed, created equal. Only in 1954, when the Supreme Court declared racial segregation in schools unconstitutional, did the US begin to address its racist laws. Finally, in the 1960s, with the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, did the Declaration's core principles start to be fully realized, almost 200 years after it was signed. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Philadelphia.
Now we're back with Bruce Fine, a constitutional lawyer, and Ernesto Castañeda, the director for the Center of Latin American and Latino Studies at American University. Ernesto, we talk about all men being created equal. That is such a core principle of this country, of course, laid out 250 years ago. These days, though, we are seeing an increasing disenfranchisement of voters and of certain communities, and certainly when it comes to minorities in this country. So do you see a regression in that mantra?
Yes, Alex. An example is the Civil Rights Act, which is a result of the civil rights movement to enfranchise African Americans as a group, so they wouldn't be systematically taken away from influencing electoral results where they lived. And in the last year, we have seen a pushback to a big degree by the decisions of the Supreme Court that have diluted the power of African Americans as a voting bloc. So that is indeed a retrocession of that equality that we espouse in principle.
Bruce, you were speaking moments ago about how we have gone backwards. The U.S. has long been held up, in large part because of these two documents, as the exemplar of revolution and of liberation movements, certainly around the world. Do you think that countries still look to the U.S.
No, I
as that
don't think
example?
so. I think we've lost the reputation. It's obvious that we don't care about human rights. Everything has got a price tag on it. We go after and prosecute those who are running the International Criminal Court, among other things. We have a president who openly says, the only thing that restrains my power is not the Constitution, not international law, not even the supreme being, my moral conscience. Now that sounds like Vladimir Lenin to me. It sounds like Joe Stalin and Ho Chi Minh and these others who said, well, we follow the Declaration. Except they didn't follow the Declaration when it said, when governments become oppressive of these unalienable rights, they have a right to overthrow them. No, they wanted to use force and violence. But I want to go back to the issue of equality and liberty, because they're two separate planes, I think, that we can chart the advance made by the Declaration. On the equality front, it's true there's been a little bit of paring back on the right to vote. But when the Voting Rights Act was passed, and I was there in 1965, if you were black and you voted, you'd end up with a cross burning in your lawn, and you'd get your kids kidnapped, and you'd probably be lynched with impunity. That's not happening today. I'm not defending it, but at least it's not the violence. Now, with regards on the liberty angle, we have gone so far backward, where we have a president of the United States openly, and it was back George W. Bush, it was Barack Obama, it was Donald Trump, claiming I can play prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner. You're out of here.
Yeah.
I don't have to report to anybody. It's all secret. The executive branch has become so bloated. And remember, the grievances against the British, it wasn't the Parliament, it was 100% against the king.
Right, exactly.
The king. We don't want kings. Now we have someone in the White House who celebrates a crown on his head.
Right.
Now, you're telling me that's not gone 250 years backward? I don't know what else it is.
We certainly have masses in the streets saying that they don't want kings. All right, gentlemen, stay with me. The story of America remains inseparable from the people who built it over the past 250 years. Indigenous communities, enslaved Africans, and generations of immigrants. New York's Queens neighborhood is one of the most vibrant and diverse in the country, where that story continues to be written in many languages, different cultures, and traditions. Heidi Ju Castro reports.
This was my great-grandfather's passport.
Anthony Serbone's great-grandfather arrived from Italy in 1936. He worked for the railroad, and 2 generations later, Serbone's parents opened an Italian restaurant in Queens, New York. Serbone still runs it with his son and mother.
I'm here as a testament to this country, giving everybody an opportunity, but you gotta work, you gotta keep your head down.
The family's old recipes haven't changed much over the years, but the neighborhood outside their door has.
Like the rest of the country, the 280 square kilometers of Queens, New York was mostly white Europeans and their descendants until that began to change in 1965, when the U.S. opened its doors to more people from more nations. That set the course for Queens to become what it is today. Nearly half of the population here is foreign-born, and more than 160 languages are spoken.
Roque Tome came from Mexico as a child. He sold flowers on the streets before joining his brother's auto shop when he was just 17.
Our parents taught us to work and make sacrifices. This country is special. It makes us proud.
A few streets over is the Queens Chinatown, where Katrina Bryant and Devin Chung teach Kung Fu. Both are from families with blended roots.
It's my father's lineage he's been in America since America was created, and my mom only is 2 generations down. They would never have been able to meet if it wasn't for America.
250 years on the backs of immigrants and immigrant struggle. Everything, culture, tradition, working styles, working habits, everything, the stuff that we wear. This here was brought from immigrants.
Not everyone came to this land by choice. During its first century, America's economic might was powered by the blood and labor of enslaved Africans who survived 10 generations of bondage before their emancipation.
This Juneteenth celebration in Queens is about the triumph of African Americans over that struggle. Linda Smith Harris's great-great-great-grandmother was enslaved in South Carolina.
He was literally executed. I don't know the circumstances or the story, but her offspring and all the people that came from her line still managed to thrive and survive.
Smith Harris is a psychiatrist. She says America is similar to her patients, still trying to cope with the wounds of collective trauma.
How do we overcome the suffering and not make that the only story about ourselves?
What is the story of America?
It's just that tension and fear of the unknown, of why people use chopsticks, why people pray, why people bow. And you have to learn that.
A story its people tell in many languages.
Yo soy americano.
我是美国人.
I am American.
All thrown into one big pot of diverse ingredients, not always melting, but at least mixed in the same soup that is America. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Queens, New York.
And our guests are still with us. Ernesto, there is a a debate, extraordinary as it is, about whether diversity is America's biggest strength. What do you make of that debate, and what does it tell you about where the country is right now?
It's a heated debate. It's very emotional, but the evidence is clear. The example of the borough of Queens in New York is a good one that we were just hearing about. You have Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis living next to each other, calmly, and next to Ecuadorians, Bolivians, Mexicans, and they create new cuisines. They learn each other's cuisines, but they learn new things. And the U.S. is right now the #1 country in the world in terms of science and innovation, thanks to a large degree because of the people coming from abroad and having their careers here and investment. So when you have this diversity in places like New York, Washington, etc., it leads to innovation, to new ways to solve common problems. So that's being the secret sauce that has made the U.S. the #1 in arts, culture, entertainment, science, government innovation, etc. So we are messing up with that recipe right now, and it's very dangerous for the future of the U.S. at a time when the population is decreasing. And not only for 250 years, but for 500 years, the country has grown in population and power because of people coming from abroad.
So just quickly, Heidi used the phrase melting pot. How do you square that with we the people, which implies one people?
One people in terms of goals and aspirations. So democracy, rights for everybody. But it's worked better since the civil rights movement, when we have believed in multiculturalism, where you can be Italian and American, African and American, Irish American, Mexican American. We are part of the same political union, but it's okay if at home we speak a different language, if we listen to different music. That strengthens the overall and makes the culture richer.
Bruce, you were talking about all the norms that are essentially being shattered. It does feel like the pace of change in society is accelerating. We are marking the 250th anniversary. When you look ahead to the next 50 years in terms of the pace of change and the norms, how do you think it will compare to the 50 years preceding this?
Well, it's up to the American people, really. We either go back to the principles of the Declaration and Constitution or proceed down the road to despotism. It's what Ben Franklin said when he emerged from the Constitutional Convention. You got a republic if you can keep it. You got to do something. I want to say as well, the United States was unique in the history of the world because it was born as an idea. America is an idea. It's not an ethnicity. It's not a gender. It's not a sexual orientation or religion. It's an idea. Everyone gets to march to their own drummer. We have the rule of law. You get to develop your faculties and you try to pursue your ambitions. That is America. And anybody who pursues those goals is an American. There's a very famous quote from Justice Antonin Scalia in a case in the U.S. Supreme Court several years ago. It says, in the eyes of the law, there is only one race, one religion, one gender, one ethnicity. It's American. That's what makes us the United States. That's why we're different than any other country. You subscribe to these ideas, you're an American. I don't care where you came from, and we judge you by two things and two things alone. Your character and accomplishments. Otherwise, we don't care. That is what America is about. And it was unique in the history of the world. Unfortunately, we're backtracking on that. Now it's everything we have. Well, where can the white people come in on immigration, the Swedes and the Finns or something? Why are we getting, I don't even want to use the word, from other countries, that they come here, they're black, they're Hispanic. That's not American. That's anti-American. And if you go back and look at the Declaration itself, we criticized King George III because it was stopping immigration. We only endowed Congress with the authority to regulate naturalization, not entry or exit. You could come here if you wanted to come here. Anyway, that's how far backward I think we've gone. But again, I go back to your question. In the next 50 years, it's the same question Ben Franklin asked. We got a republic if you can keep it.
You can keep it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts on this historic moment. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was Ernesto Castañeda, the director for the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies at American University, and Bruce Fein, a constitutional lawyer. The United States has drawn people from around the world seeking opportunity, freedom, and a chance to build something new. Manuel Rapallo looks at some of the immigrants whose contributions helped define the nation.
From the nation's founding to the digital age, immigrants have helped build many of the institutions, industries, and ideas that define the United States. And few places illustrate that better than this memorial to Albert Einstein, a refugee who found a home in America and helped transform modern science. In government and business, immigrants helped build the foundations of American power. Alexander Hamilton, born in the Caribbean, became the nation's first Treasury Secretary and helped establish America's financial system. Scottish immigrant Andrew Carnegie later built a steel empire that helped fuel America's industrial expansion. And in science, few figures loom larger than Albert Einstein. The German-born physicist fled Nazi persecution and continued his work here in the United States, helping cement America's reputation as a global center of innovation and research. Immigrants also helped shape America's role in the world. Madeleine Albright arrived as a refugee from what is now the Czech Republic and would become the first woman to serve as Secretary of State. Her story reflects a broader tradition of newcomers rising to positions of national leadership. America's cultural influence was also shaped by immigrants as well. Austrian-born Arnold Schwarzenegger arrived with dreams of becoming a champion bodybuilder before becoming a Hollywood star and governor of California. Cuban-born Desi Arnaz helped revolutionize television, introducing production techniques that transformed the entertainment industry. Their backgrounds were different and their journeys were different, but together they helped shape the nation they chose to call home. As the United States marks 250 years of history, the story of the nation remains in many ways the story of people who arrived from somewhere else and helped redefine what America could become. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And that's all from us here in Washington. Handing back to Heidi Zhu Castro and then Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
Thanks, Alex. We'll be back tomorrow with more special coverage of the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence. That's on This Is America at 18:30 GMT or 14:30 Eastern. See you then.